Hi, I'm Arsen Kashkashian from the Boulder Bookstore, and I'm here with Steven Wingate, the author of the short story collection Wifeshopping, which will be coming out in July. Steven, I wanted to ask you a few questions, and the title, Wifeshopping, could apply to many of the stories in the collection. It's a very varied collection, stylistically and with many different characters, and yet you have the theme of men looking for relationships throughout the book. How did that come about?
The collection came about between about 1992 and 1999 at the end of an unsuccessful marriage and sort of the beginnings of a successful one. And I wrote a whole bunch of stories during that time, probably 24 stories that were all clustered around this idea of searching for love because I think both psychically and imaginatively I was really trying to figure out what the love thing was and how relationships worked and why they didn't work. So out of that big bunch of stories over the years and years and years, I just pulled out the best, and those are the 13 in the collection.
Well, you've ended that stretch of time married, and yet your characters do not have a similar fate. What was the difference between you and your characters?
I think if there's one thing I've learned from working with these characters, writing about these characters, and also from living, it's that it's very easy to confuse the search for your own identity with the search for love. And I think most of the characters in that book make that mistake to one degree or another. Some of them are closer to finding some kind of balance, and some of them just don't really have much hope. So I think a lot of flexibility is obviously required in a long-term relationship, and some of these characters know that, and some of these characters just aren't able to get beyond their own search for self.
A lot of your characters seem to find bits and pieces of themselves in objects. They go to flea markets, they go to yard sales, they dig up objects in the backyard, and most of these objects they find, though, don't lead to happiness in their relationships.
I think that objects, we really invest a lot of meaning in objects, and sometimes two people, even people who are very close to each other, can invest extremely different kinds of meaning in these objects. And when we invest meaning in objects, we're often bringing in our entire history, our family history, who we think we are, who we used to think we were. And sometimes in relationships, especially in this book, those things really happen at cross purposes, and they form crux points in relationships, because one person may feel one way about an object and another person feels entirely differently, and it forces them to confront who they are and how they feel about each other.
Mm-hmm. The stories contain a lot of heartache, but they feel so vibrant and alive, and they're very entertaining to read. How do you deal with that dichotomy? Maybe you're dealing with a heavy issue, a breakup, and yet you have a very entertaining story.
As a writer, I have to entertain myself and keep myself happy. Working on a story over many, many drafts, over many, many years, you have to get to know your characters, and you have to get to know their warts as well as the things that are funny about them or quirky about them. So I think that I always try to get to know the character in some kind of complete way, and everybody's got their own humor and their own likability. And so finding that in my characters, I think, allows me to write them better than I would if I were simply to focus on one aspect of their character.
Mm-hmm. Well, so many of them are in transition moments in this narrative, in this short story collection, and you've captured them perfectly. You've created full characters in very short stories, and it does beg the question, will we see some of these characters in later works?
We won't see the characters, I don't think. Always could be wrong on that one. But I think some of the themes that you've talked about, especially with objects and this kind of sanctity of objects and how they work in relationships, is definitely showing up in the novel that I'm working on. So that will show up. I don't know if there will be a sequel, Wifeshopping 2. I kind of think not. But I really do wish these characters luck and wherever they go in their lives. And if one of them resurfaces, then I'll definitely work with him or her, and it may have the same name, may not, but the same kind of underlying soul may be there in other characters that I work with. You never can tell.